This is by username AppRoyal, APROYAL, titled, "There is something wrong with the man who comes to our diner every morning." The bell jingled above the entryway as the door to the diner swung open. Like clockwork, the man strode in. 9 a.m., rain or shine. He made his way to one of the booths by the window, hung his coat on the nearby rack, and slid his bowler hat across the table. I watched as he calmly pulled open a newspaper. After a few minutes, I walked over, his lips silently mouthing the words he was reading on the page. I hardly needed to ask the question, but I decided to indulge us both. "What can I get for you, sir?" It was the same order every time. 2 scrambled eggs, beans, and hash with a side order of back bacon. A cup of coffee, 2 creams, 1 sugar. The man had been showing up for months, always quietly finding a seat at one of the booths. He was always alone, his only interaction seemingly to order his refills of coffee. There wasn't much of a routine to speak of. After flipping through the morning paper, he would just sit and gaze out the window. This in itself was not unusual. We sure had our share of regulars at our little roadside diner, but none quite like this man. It was difficult to explain. "Still in town for work, I see." He glanced up from the sports section, the wrinkles on his face thick and leathery like an elephant's hide. "No rest for the wicked." I poured him another round of Java, wisps of steam rising out of his mug. I placed my hand softly over his for a moment, his knuckles bony and ice cold. "Today's the day. I can feel it." He offered a gentle smile. "Thanks, Lydia. Me too." The shift flew by, the day largely uneventful as I juggled multiple tables. The typical rush of people at Dawn's diner came and went. The senior crowd, the truck drivers, the family vacationers. It was an eclectic mix of customers that seemed to gravitate towards the restaurant over the years. The checkered floors were a little more scuffed, the bubblegum walls were a little more faded, the red leather booths had a few more cracks, but overall the place had largely stood the test of time. We had survived at our location just off the highway since the grand opening in the late 70s. I should know, as I had been coming here since I was a little girl. Grandma used to take me for root beer floats on the weekends. These fond memories are the reason why I chose to work here all these years. With a bad back now and carpal tunnel, all of the excuses in the world to retire, something keeps me coming back to this place. If it wasn't for this job, I would be on the other side of the counter, putzing around with a coffee and a side of eggs. At least this way I was staying busy and getting paid. Today was shaping up to be just like the others. Not much changes in a place like this. While I finished wiping down another table, I glanced over at the old man in the booth. He had a dull expression across his face, his body unmoved. He was staring out the window like a lost puppy. As the sun set, the street lights in the parking lot began to turn on. Before it got too dark, the man would settle his tab and pack up his things. Then I would see him bright and early in the morning, caught in the same small-town time loop that I was in. I brought back a tray of dirty dishes to the kitchen. When I rounded the corner, the man was standing. "Can I get you anything, honey? Need me to break a bill?" The bell jingled. "He's here," the man said, his eyes widening. He was transfixed by the sight of the young man who had just entered. He was tall, sinewy fellow with a thick head of hair. We watched him walk to a nearby table by the registers, plop his backpack on the counter, and head straight for the washroom. "Are you sure it's him?" I asked. He nodded. "That is excellent, just excellent." He was a man of very few words, but from the little information he had shared with me, the months of waiting that had occurred, I felt a sudden rush of emotion that overwhelmed me. Wiping tears from my eyes, I said, "Say hi to him for me, okay?" The man's face remained unchanged. He looked stunned. his body stiff, his feet planted on the floor. I suddenly felt silly. "It will be fine," I assured him. "Just talk to him." In an instant, his expression had soured. He leaned in close to whisper, "You need to leave." "Excuse me?" "Now," he hissed. "Let me be with my son." The wiry man exited the washroom. We watched him pull up a chair at the table, nervously fidgeting with his hands. The old man's eyes darted from me to the hallway, then back to me again, insisting that I leave. He took a deep breath, then exhaled slowly. Startled by the man's sharp tone and hurt by his scathing urgency for me to leave, I chose to honor his wishes. What did I really care anyway? The reunion would go on without me. I stepped away, heading towards the hallway to the kitchen. I was nearly at my manager's office when the lights began to flicker. Then I heard the blast. The devastating sound of shattered glass and shrill screams filled the air. The diner suddenly went black. There was instant chaos in the hallways, people frantically pushing and clawing their way to the back exit. The alarm blared in high-pitched dings as the water rained down from the sprinklers above. The lights flickered on again, only for a moment, before fizzling back out. More panicked shrieks followed as I struggled to escape. After what felt like an eternity, I was outside with the stars and the steady breeze, a little sweaty but otherwise unharmed. I wove through the small groups of people huddled together, many of whom were soaked and just trying to catch their breath. I passed by some of my coworkers who looked shell-shocked, some of them crying, others shakily holding their cell phones to their ears. I trudged towards the front of the building. The pillar of flames crackled in the utter darkness of the restaurant. The flames were fanning out, unperturbed by the spitting of water from the sprinklers. There was a glint of movement in the embers, shadows of something cutting in and out of the light. I couldn't look away. The parking lot began to fill with curious bystanders seeing the commotion from the freeway, and patrons of the restaurant who slowly made their way to the front of the building. "Lydia! Oh my goodness, I'm so glad to see you're okay." Ruth, the restaurant manager, closed the distance and held me in a bear hug. "I'm good, love. How about you? Did everyone make it out okay?" "I think so. It was a crude head count, but I think I got everyone." "What the hell happened?" I asked. "I ain't got no damn clue," she said, glancing down at her cell phone. "Thought it came from the kitchen at first, Jerry forgetting to turn off the gas or something stupid. Wouldn't put it past that dimwit. I was pretty certain, but that's not what some of the others are saying." I paused. What are they saying? The fire truck sirens roared from the highway as the red vehicles rolled into the parking lot. I overheard someone saying they saw a man. 4 firefighters hopped out from one of the trucks, lugging a massive hose atop their shoulders. Another group stormed the entrance. "A man?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Yep, a man," she confirmed. "Blown up and everything, completely engulfed in flames." She shook her head. "Sounds like a whole lot of nonsense to me." Water flooded out of the nozzle in a fierce stream. A couple of firefighters instructed us to step back along with some of the other spectators. I paused, biting my tongue. I contemplated heading home to get some rest, but as the flames began to simmer down, I decided to confide in Ruth. "Ruth," I said, "you know the man who comes in every morning? The old man with the hat? You know the one I'm talking about? The one who stays by the window all day." She raised one of her eyebrows as I continued. I don't know, but I think he might have something to do with this." The police sirens were deafening as the squad cars ripped into the parking lot. "I ain't seen no one like that, Lydia." My heart raced. "Ruth, come on. He sits at the booths all day." We argued about the man for a while, the smoke heavy and clinging to our clothing. Most of the crowd had headed home. "I know about all the regulars, darling. Ain't no man show up every day and I don't recognize him." Now my blood was beginning to boil. Ruth? Seriously, this isn't funny. Equipped with a fire-retardant suit and gas mask, one of the crime scene investigators was lugging a charred backpack out of the building in a clear plastic bag labeled evidence. What remained of the backpack were chunks of burnt fabric. It was clearly unzipped, revealing the barrel of an assault rifle covered in ash. The weapon was pressed up against the sealed plastic bag. Ruth placed her hand on my shoulder. "Get some rest, my dear." We didn't hear much about the fire for a couple of months. The coroners and fire inspectors were left baffled, attributing the event to something they termed SHC, or spontaneous human combustion. It was an incredibly rare occurrence that left a lot of questions. Witnesses claimed they saw the young man go up in flames. It was sudden immolation without a plausible source of ignition. There were trace levels of gunpowder found on the man's rifle and on the lining of the man's bag, but the fire experts still couldn't trace the source of the spark. No bullets had been fired. The mystery looms over our town, with many tourists making it a point to visit the diner. Operations were shut down indefinitely for nearly half a year while construction crews worked through the rubble. It took a while, but Don's Diner finally got its much-needed makeover. The old booths were replaced, new jukeboxes were put in, and the kitchen was completely remodeled. The owners opted to keep the iconic 70s style with some much-needed additional upgrades. We were a tourist attraction now, after all. It's still the old Don's Diner with a new twist. The friendly family establishment aura still remains, but the mystery of that night makes the place feel different. That's how I would describe myself now. Same old Lydia, but different. Business is as booming as ever, with new faces mixed in with the old. I'm grateful I survived the fire. I truly am. But I often catch myself staring out the diner window, looking for someone I hardly knew. I never saw the man again.